All right. Here we go.
Hi there. Is Mike Simmons town hall? Okay, great. Here. Well, what's your last name?
A lot of people really like you connect with your community. You just sit and watch.
Got it.
And you connect from other districts. They want to run
Yeah,
now.
we got all sorts of
I'm
notes
like,
here.
yeah, why not? Democracy. I was a friend of yesterday.
How's your
I want to teach them what is democracy.
Okay.
I'll call you a signature.
All right.
She's
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna call the police. I said, "Go ahead." The escalate, man.
Last time I saw you was election day.
Yeah, no, great to see you.
I'm
Yeah, it's our first town hall since then. So.
Yeah, you know, I used to live in this area, so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. And the cut over.
Yeah, Mike's been here as well.
Deja.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
All right. Well, welcome, folks. We're gonna just give it a couple more minutes. Mike is actually currently having his bill heard in committee virtually. So he's going to be running over here after that's done. It's going to be probably 10 minutes from now. So we're going to give about 5 more minutes for people to arrive, and then I'll kick things off, get us started so we can have time for Q&A.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming out in this beautiful weather and choosing to be in here instead of outside. So I'll start in about 5 minutes.
So what's the number for the district?
13.
13.
It's the high number for you described. 27,000 people voted. That's a lot. Out of the 5 candidates, and like, it's one Republican, so it's not like you can say, no. 27,000.
And that was in 27. What was the
Democratic-
percentage
Democratic
turnout?
vote, 27,000 people
Oh,
voted.
okay.
That's still a good number, 27,000.
I don't know what to, compared to what?
Like, for example, in women's district, because she always run for her stuff, no opposition, she got 20,000.
No.
You can look at the board of
Did you get a
election.
handout?
They did they posted all results.
You guys get a handout for today? This is going to be what we're going over.
Thank you, man, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Get one.
No, I can have them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Homework.
Oh, this is cool. That's a lot of boards. No, thank you. Fee. I just found out that my brother pays for the water and the sewage and garbage and all that. We're renting. Isn't usually the owner? We pay for the water.
Yeah.
The other buddies, I trust my brother. He's
Yeah, I mean,
and they're built
it's usually included.
and there's bill processing fee $5. Bill processing fee for what?
Oh, that sounds like a junk fee.
We pay $5 just done fee, bro. Like
Doesn't sound like a good landlord.
we live in Upton.
Yeah.
Fox Fire. Fox Fire is rule.
And I just put on my door.
What I-
I checked with my brother. My brother does not pay attention sometimes. He just signs. It's like it's okay. I mean, it's expensive anywhere else. I mean, yeah, but did you read?
You gonna argue with a $5 fee?
coffee.
It's sort of like you're in an awkward position to like, do you want the apartment or not?
For $5. I'm not thinking about it. You pay for water and sewage. And what else? Garbage, trash pickup, bill processing fee. So we're gonna pay for like $40 just for those things. They're not mentioning the electricity and the gas. Those are separate.
Yeah, interesting. It doesn't have a line item for property taxes, I see.
I have to check with my brother because he's the one that said it.
We have
Just the
a,
amount we pay for rent is just unbelievable.
All right, folks. So we're going to get started here. Thank you all for coming so much. My name is Connor Bishop. I'm a manager of constituent service for Mike Simmons. I'm one of his 3 full-timers on staff. Heather Sanger, our chief of staff, is out sick today, so we did not want her to come. And Gabby Tuodros, you would have seen her probably walking in. She's our outreach coordinator. And soon you'll see Statesman Mike Simmons. He's a very recognizable guy. So just to start with some housekeeping, we are doing a live stream of the event, so this will be recorded. We are live right now, so you can say hi to YouTube. We are going to keep it online for prosperity afterwards as well, so you can go back and rewatch it. What we're going to do today is we're going to go over all the pending legislation that the senator's been pushing for, kind of the highlights. There's of course bills that aren't mentioned on here, like the governor's build plan that he's really pushing for. And some, we've heard a lot of concerns about age operating system verification, so we'll talk about that a little later on. But first, we'll just start by talking about what bills he's working on now, and that we're trying to get across the finish line going into the spring. So, we're first going to start by looking at this House Bill 3564. We're really proud of this legislation. This is our rental junk fee ban bill. You know, the senator had been pushing for this for a few years now. We worked with Representative Nabila Syed in the House to get it passed. So it did start off in the House. We got it through the Senate, and then we got it back through the House recently. Chambers, and now it just awaits the governor's signature. Going over a few of the things in the bill, it explicitly bans 11 different types of junk fees that we saw. A lot of these junk fees that we included came from constituent stories that we had, you know, folks calling us and saying my landlord's trying to charge me a fee for calling the maintenance hotline after hours. And you know, no one should be charged a fee just for trying to report things when, you know, an issue is arising at that moment. A lot of these fees also came from a Chicago Sun-Times article breaking down a lot of the junk fees that are present to renters even after they sign a lease. So this bill explicitly bans those 11 different types of fees. It requires any fees to be listed on the first page of the lease. So this would override any city legislation or city rules. So this would be the new front page. It would also stop landlords from charging any fees that are not listed on the lease. So we don't want people to get surprised by a fee in the middle of their 6-month or 12-month lease. So I'd keep an eye out for that. The governor still needs to sign it, and we believe the effective date after he signs it would be January 1st of next year. So any lease renewals you do before December 1st, the landlord can continue with the status quo, but after January 1st, if the governor signs this bill, our new law will take effect. This also caps tenant application fees at $50 and caps non-refundable move-in fees at 20% of rent. You know, given that these move-in fees are non-refundable, we really thought it was important to put a cap on these. You know, we've seen move-in fees of $500, $600 on an $1,800 rental apartment, and it's just ludicrous, really. So we were really happy to see that. And we really think the application fee cap is important as well, because, you know, finding an apartment can be a very time-consuming process, and it can be costly. And we don't want people to have to spend hundreds of dollars to find a place to live. And we really talked to the landlords a lot about this legislation. We agreed at $50 being a good cap. recognize that a lot of background checks can be around $50 or less. But I always say, you know, what does that rent cover? So we want to give renters more accessibility on the front end and just make it a bit more clear in the application, the apartment hunting process. We also included an exemption for owner-occupied buildings with 6 units or less. This really was focused on, you know, multi-generational households that live in a 3-flat, own all 3 units. They maybe rent out the bottom unit to their, you know, son-in-law or something. We just want to make it so they can, you know, maintain their lease process how they'd like, and this just really focuses on those corporate landlords that, you know, Mike has said he doesn't really want to call them landlords. He wants these corporate entities that are buying up blocks of housing, and they're not even based in Illinois. So we're trying to counter that, and we think House Bill 3564 is like an important step in that process. And that one is the bill that has made the most progress so far. So going to page 2, we have a number of bills that have passed one chamber. And given that we're in the middle of April and the legislative process goes into the end of spring, or the end of May, I apologize, these are actually some bills that are pretty bipartisanship. So first we have an expansion to the Jet Hawkins Act. You might remember the Jet Hawkins Act. This was one of the first bills that put Mike on the map. The Jet Hawkins Act banned any hair discrimination if the hair, you know, was related to your ethnic background. We didn't want to see, you know, kids going to school and having their hair styled a certain way, and administration saying you need to adhere to our really strict measures. Mike feels passionately about hair being an expression of your identity and culture. So we've actually passed an expansion to that act to protect any hairstyles related to your religious background. This was a really important issue for our Jewish and Muslim neighbors, particularly when it comes to facial hair as well. You know, a lot of these folks have a lot of connection to their hairstyle related to their religion, so we wanted to get that passed. Another bill that the senator is really happy with, he was a co-sponsor of this bill. It expands the definition of sexual harassment to basically modernize it for the digital age. You know, we've seen deepfakes popping up, digitally altered images, doxing and electronic tracking. Just the definition of sexual harassment doesn't include all these new modern digital ways that really predators can, you know, get back at people in a, you know, really inappropriate way. So this is really good for any victims that might, you know, encounter online sexual harassment. It also will make it easier to get an order of protection or an extension of an order of protection, allowing folks to request a virtual hearing if that's a bit more convenient. You know, you don't want to have to leave your house to make these types of reports. Another bill that's passed through the Senate is the Micromobility Safety Framework. This one's a massive bill that, you know, tries to tackle all these new types of 2-wheel and 1-wheel devices that we're seeing on roads. You know, we have these classifications of e-bikes that are class 1, class 2, class 3, and a lot of bikes that are being sold online might go above these classifications. And we are just concerned as a state legislative body about these unregulated devices that are making its way into the Illinois market. So this is just a very large framework trying to establish new definitions of types of transportation we haven't really seen before. You can definitely be familiar with those kind of 1-wheel, I call them electric unicycles. You'll see the guys with the big motorcycle helmets on. I've seen them on Lakeshore Drive before, and it's kind of insane. So we want to just impose some more safety measures there, try to get the public definition upgraded. And this, yeah, particularly focusing on devices that are going over 28 miles per hour, which is currently the legal limit for electric mobility. Another one that is in committee and is actually being heard as we speak is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. This is another bill that really focuses on renters and tries to counter these corporate entities taking over our city blocks. So this would establish a right of first refusal for tenants of a rental property. So we've seen it before that a rental building goes up for sale and it's sold to a corporate entity, and it's really just a quick transaction. So this would allow any sale of a rental property going on to first allow the tenants the opportunity to purchase the building. This would mandate that rental property owners provide notices to tenants that they are putting the property on the market. It would give them a period of time where it's exclusively for tenants to see if they can get the finances together, see if they can get enough renters on board to purchase the property altogether. We see all the time just how all these properties are transferred from corporate landlord to corporate landlord, and we really want to try to empower people, get people financial stability, and really generational wealth, because we see it all the time with single-family homes that you can pass it down to your children, but as a lifelong renter, you might not be able to establish a house for your children to take over. So by having more renters transform into homeowners, I think that's a really important step forward for the housing market. We can go over to the back here. We've got a lot more stuff related to renters. One thing we want to tackle as well is any rental price coordinating. So we've seen it before in other states. They've already passed bans like this that stop landlords from entering into non-competition agreements with each other or attempting to price coordinate. We've seen some research and news articles about these new AI softwares popping up, and landlords can create an account and they can share rental prices with each other. And it really eliminates the competition in the rental market. We talk about all the time, like how little housing we have. So even with this housing shortage, we don't need landlords coordinating with each other to charge the same rent and kind of chase each other to the top. So this bill would ban landlords from entering into non-competition agreements, price coordinating. It's kind of leaning into the AI aspect of it as well, because it's a very rapidly evolving industry that has gone unregulated so far. Next up, we have Senate Bill 5 and House Bill 5394. This would end the credit score requirements for voucher renters. We've been pushing for a long time to get credit scores banned entirely from rentals. This is the first step in that process, I would say. I don't think anybody who has a housing choice voucher or a project-based voucher needs to prove they have a credit history or a credit score. We've seen it all the time where, medical debt or educational debt can bring down your credit score, and that should not be used as an opportunity to deny someone housing. So this bill would eliminate a requirement specifically for folks with a rental subsidy. We're talking about HUD voucher holders, project-based vouchers, and this is just one step in that process. We're trying to make it a greater, more widespread policy. We have plenty of people in the legislature that still uphold this credit score history as an important financial metric, or we find it to be just a bit too much of a barrier. We've introduced bills in the past that would make it where if you need to renew a lease or you need to get a new rental, instead of providing a credit history, you can show that you were successfully renting for the previous 12 months. If you've been renting for 12 months successfully, I think that's plenty enough for a landlord to make that decision that they trust you to financially pay your rent each month. Next up, we have a protection of minor gender-affirming personal info. This is a piece of legislation that's been passed in a lot of other states, and we're just trying to the protections established by the Gender Affirming Healthcare Protection Act, and essentially just impose a bit more barriers between public and personal information regarding medication related to gender-affirming care. I think Mike would have a bit more say on that, so maybe we'll give him the opportunity to speak on that when he arrives. Another big bill that we've been really pushing for with a lot of partners is Senate Bill 594. So we would call it a shield protection law for LGBTQ individuals. We've seen it before, a lot of Republicans nationwide threatening, saying that being transgender is a symptom of mental illness, which is completely wrong, just false. So we want to get ahead of any local municipalities trying to use LGBTQ identity as a symptom of mental illness in Illinois. So we've been working with Chicago Therapy Collective, Brave Space Alliance, Center on Halstead, Very Proud, Equality Illinois, NAMI Illinois, to try to establish a law that would stop any law enforcement or state prosecutors from labeling LGBTQ identity as a proof of a mental illness taking place. We've seen this kind of threat rising in Republican states. We do recognize that Illinois is very much a sanctuary state, but we want to have these laws on the books so if power ever changes hands, there's already law of the land that makes that less likely to happen. Another bill currently in committee that we're working on is a extension to the WARN Act. So WARN is requirement for mass layoffs. Anytime there's a mass layoff above 50 members, it needs to be reported to the state. And Mike is here, so I'll give the. He's just going to sit in the audience, I think. But we've started off going over all the legislation we're working on. So we talked about first the rental gun fee bill. We've passed through the Jet Pockets Act expansion. But you can even just take the opportunity to come up and share your views. All right, you want to take it out? Yeah, come on, Pat. Come on up. I'll show you where. So we were talking about the show. So, did you tell him what just happened? I was telling you in committee. Yeah, talking about it.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike Simmons, I'm your state senator. How are you? Hi. I recognize some of you here. So actually, yeah, we're not. There's no mic here. So been running all day. Today has been a busy and productive day. Connor just mentioned to you that I just came straight from the Senate Executive Committee where I was presenting a housing bill that would give tenants the right of first refusal to purchase a building when they're sold to private equity firms. A lot of our naturally occurring affordable housing in all over Chicago, but especially in neighborhoods that have a lot of amenities are being yanked up, and so we want to give people an opportunity to be able to purchase those buildings or work with an affordable housing developer to do so. The Senate Executive Committee had a marathon session today. Went through 12 housing bills, which is a win because I've been honestly fighting for 2 years now to get a housing committee set up in the Senate. We haven't been able to get one, but because of the tension that myself and a few other progressives have created, we're starting to really get real serious discussion in the Senate on housing legislation. So that's not enough. We got to pass some of these bills, and I'm glad Connor was able to talk to you about the bill that we actually just passed from the Senate and the House that bans 11 different types of junk fees on renters. That was a huge fight. It was a big coalition that worked on this bill with me. Shout out to every one of them. I think it was about 11 organizations total, including organizations with disability justice, One Northside, and others that fought for renters. And so that bill is now on the governor's desk, and I anticipate that I can't see a reason why he wouldn't sign it, so we'll keep you posted on that, and hopefully a lot more housing legislation that will pass this year and next year. So just quick recap, Connor probably already mentioned this. Our Senate district covers Lincoln Square, which is where I was born and raised, actually just a few blocks north of here. Uptown, which is just to the east, Ravenswood, Arcadia Terrace, which is just to the north and northwest, Ravenswood, Edgewater, Rogers Park, West Ridge. So it's a really diverse district. And housing, by the way, is the #1 issues we hear from our constituents. It's people like you that come to my district office in crisis who are dealing with housing issues or affordability issues. So I'm proud to represent our district. Like I said, born and raised here, born and raised in Lincoln Square. Connor may have mentioned this, but I chair the Senate Public Health Committee, which gives me an opportunity to exercise really aggressive oversight on some of the federal disastrous decisions right now that, for example, are cutting Medicaid. Just as a quick point of just update for you, last Wednesday I sat on the Appropriations Health and Human Service Committee, and it was a 4-hour committee hearing, kind of like what we just had, and it went to 11 o'clock at night, and I asked several questions of the Secretary of Health and Family Services about what is the state of Illinois doing to protect people who are likely going to lose their Medicaid. And as you can imagine, not enough, and so I'm really probably irritating a lot of them right now, but it's the right thing to do because we don't want our neighbors who depend on Medicaid and all of a sudden not have health care or just get kicked off those roads. So housing and healthcare are two really big issues for our district. Transportation and transit is a really big issue for constituents. We hear about it all the time. You apologies if I've said this to you before, but if you meet me for the first time, I'm a state senator who uses public transit. I use Amtrak to get back and forth to our capital every week to go legislate for our district. I am an avid cyclist. I was on my bike yesterday for miles. I really try to do everything I can to make our infrastructure safer for people who choose not to be in cars all the time. Nate Hutchison, who's here with us, is a constituent of Lincoln Square, who's worked really closely with me on a number of bills that are focused in that direction. One bill I want to mention under transit that I think is timely is I'm trying to push a bill that would create, would recommend a safer infrastructure for, or what we really call as a connected bike grid for all of Chicago and every single suburb that surrounds Chicago. What does that mean? How many of you here are familiar with the Levitt Greenway? Okay. How many of you here have biked on a protected bike lane? Okay. So the goal with that legislation is to have the Chicago Metropolitan Agency Planning, which is a delegate agency of the state and city, to produce some recommendations on what streets make the most sense for a city and suburban-wide bike grid for Chicago. I think that's pretty cool to have a scenario where in 2028 we'll have some professional recommendations on what streets, what arterial streets make sense, what side streets make sense, not just right here in 47th Ward because we have a friendly alderman, but all over the region so that people can seriously get on their bikes and not worry about, the ward boundary stops at Winamax, so now, I gotta worry about being endured for 8 more blocks, and then we want to get away with that. And I'm proud that bill is moving through the Appropriations Committee, Public Safety Committee. Another bill I want to mention is there's a legislation that I was proud to co-sponsor last week that would create basically a rail strategy for the state of Illinois. Having some concrete recommendations for how different municipalities and localities can work with the state to create a more comprehensive rail network for the state of Illinois. My North Star is high-speed rail. That's where I want us to go. I'm really ambitious on transit in the state senate, and I think that rail strategy is the on-ramp. And I'm not promise you I didn't think about that in the city. But that's going to help us strategically have a pathway to engage the governor's office, Department of Transportation, and other critical stakeholders to make that happen, so that folks can rely on rail 20 years from now, like we do now. So that covers housing, that covers transit. There's a lot to be said with healthcare, but I did want to point out a couple of other things real quick on that. Healthcare in the state senate, there's a few different things that I as a state senator can do. So first, they're just finding money for our local hospitals and clinics. So that's obviously the ante of what we need to do, and we do that every year for federally qualified health clinics in our area like Swedish and Endeavor, for Heartland Health Clinic, which is right in Ravensville and Uptown, for the Women's Health Center in Uptown, for our local abortion clinics, etc. I've been really proud to be really aggressive and bringing millions of dollars back to those organizations. We'll be doing that again in this spring's budget. If you've got any suggestions on that or questions, reach out to me, ask me here tonight, because we want that to be a participatory process for all constituents, because we all depend on healthcare. We all know people who need healthcare. Another thing I want to mention as a quick recap is in my previous 2 sessions, I've passed at least a half dozen bills that do everything from stopping insurance companies from sending bills to people who are uninsured, to the big medical debt relief initiative. That was a bill that I passed out of the state senate, which is now law, which to date has forgiven medical debt for 520,000 residents in Illinois, to the tune of $1.1 billion. And the average amount of debt forgiven was $817. So this is really making a difference for people right here in our district. We have people in places like Lincoln Square and Ashwater who are under the gun of medical debt. My mother was a Lincoln Square resident until 2020 who experienced just that very situation, and that's why I've been very, perhaps passionate about healthcare and was happy working with the governor and passing the medical debt relief initiative. If you've got questions on that, reach out to my office. We'll tell you exactly where to go. This is how that program works. Everybody knows somebody who's dealing with medical debt. There's some other bills that I'd like to mention real quick. For those of you here who see e-bikes or use e-bikes, we passed a bill out of the state senate last week that would create a regulatory framework for e-bikes so that they're safe. And those are regulatory framework is supported by Active Transportation Alliance and all of our bike-friendly organizations. So I feel good about that to sort of add another rung to active transport for our state and for sustainability. Also proud to be a chief co-sponsor of the Wetlands Protections Act, which is a bill that is going to protect our rapidly disappearing wetlands all across Illinois. We've already lost 90% of our wetlands in the state of Illinois, and I am determined to do everything I can to protect what we have left and replant, reestablish wetlands that can be brought back. Some of you probably read that a few years ago, the state of Illinois actually released a herd of bison not far from Joliet and the Ponzi Glacial Trail Basin. We can actually restore our wetlands, and if we do that, it helps us to have better conservation goals for our state. It's better for our planet and environment, and keeps our state beautiful. And I think it's really good for our everyone's wellness and mental health. So proud to be fighting a good fight on that with the Illinois Environmental Council. I've got another legislation that I wanted to talk about, Senate Bill 2929. Would provide some transparency in property tax rules as they pertain to entities all across this region, but especially in our neighborhoods who maybe recently moved here and are being billed for people and entities that were there before them. It's a stupid situation. We are heard from constituents. One of them is running a daycare center on Montrose where they keep getting a bill from the Cook County assessor for the entity that was there before them in 2018. That is silly. I'm proud to be running a bill that would fix that in our state's revenue laws. I mention that because it's a good example of constituents who come to our office with practical problems that really are creating big headaches for people like kiddos who are in our early daycare centers in Ravenswood, or schools that are in Rogers Park that are trying to barely do what they're doing without having to worry about extra bureaucracy from a government agency like the assessors. So I'm fighting on that. It's a little wonky in the weeds, but it really does help to make sure that those kind of agencies can stay operating in our communities and they don't just fold in frustration and leave. We need to have our early, our daycare facilities here for our young folks in the neighborhood. So I'm proud of that. And we should be charging people taxes that are not theirs to pay. Let's just talk about that too. It's just basic good governance and staying organized. I want to comment. Did I get all of any bills that I left out?
No, that's the important stuff so far. And
okay, did you talk to them about the shield protection as well?
Yes, a little bit. Yeah.
So LGBTQ rights are a big priority for our district because there's a big. We have the largest concentration of LGBTQ people in the state in our area, and I'm proud to be one of them. I'm the first openly gay person to serve in the state senate. And unfortunately, this is now one of the hardest times in my short life it is to be a queer person, unfortunately, in our country. So I was proud 2 years ago to work to pass legislation that makes Illinois a sanctuary state for trans families that are being persecuted in other states because maybe someone got gender-affirming care or some other thing that I would say is a human right. I don't think the government should be making it illegal for people to get health care. And so I was proud to fight really hard on that bill with a number of actually LGBTQ-led organizations right here in our district, like the Chicago Therapy Collective. We made that the law in 2023. The remaining work, though, unfortunately, with the Trump administration's day-to-day, week-to-week assault on LGBTQ communities, there's always more work to do in this area. That's my point. And so what does that mean for this session? I am carrying a bill, Senate Bill 594, that would prohibit any level of government from classifying an LGBTQ person as having a mental illness. That is something that has been done in the past. There are very corrupt politicians in our country who talk about that as something that they might do. And I think we need to get ahead of these things and make sure that Illinois remains a sanctuary state where LGBTQ folks like me and perhaps some of you here can feel safe and can start families. We have a lot of LGBTQ people who are here now as refugees who moved here just the last 5 years, and they're in places like Lincoln Square and Rogers Park because it's a really welcoming community, and I'm proud to fight that good fight. Okay. Let me also just we have 52 bills we've caught this session. I don't want to go through all of them verbatim, but there are a few others I really think you should know about. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. So AI is a thing. We hear about it from constituents all the time. I would say that AI holds great promise for a lot of things as it pertains to the human species. I don't think that AI should be determining people's rents. I don't think that AI should be making decisions in healthcare. I don't think that AI should be impersonating and creating garages of people that are fake So I'm proud to be a part of a group of state senators that is introducing ambitious legislation coming out swinging on the topic of AI. Specifically, I've got legislation that would, well, it's an amendment to the WARN Act, so never mind the title of the bill, but it's Senate Bill 3571, and what it would do is it would require all companies, all employers, if they are about to lay people off, and there's an AI component of how the decision was reached, they have to alert the state of that. They have to notify the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, local stakeholders, employment agencies, all should know about this because we shine light on this problem. We can actually address it head on. I'm really worried about AI and what it's going to do to automate work. We're already seeing people who are quote unquote low skilled. All work takes skill. It takes hard work to get out of bed and go work somewhere every day. And the fact of the matter is some of our lowest paid workers who are already, I would say, are experiencing injustice in our economy are going to work every day just that their job may be automated to a machine. That's not right, and I'm proud to be fighting for a bill that would hopefully put an end to that, or just put some sunlight on the problem so that the employers would think twice about what they're doing. Some of my other colleagues, just to give you some more quick updates, are carrying legislation. Myself and Senator Guzman, who represents the district right to the west of us, are carrying a bill that would stop AI coordination and rental pricing. That's absolutely a must, particularly when we know that AI models will just replicate already existing systemic biases and things that will predictably and clichély lead to a situation where those who are low-wage workers, or those who are black or brown, or those who are queer, or those who are seniors are going to get pushed out of housing markets because the AI model disseminated something about them that didn't take an AI model to tell us. We know that those biases were already there. The example I always like to mention is I have another bill I'm fighting for that would stop credit score checks from being an issue that would stop someone from being able to rent a unit. You can't use that to prohibit someone from rental housing if they haven't had an opportunity to build credit. And the reality is that our financial markets stop so many low-income people from even being able to be banked or to establish credit. And if housing is a human right, then we can't have that status quo continue. And so that's just another bill I wanted to mention that is related to some of these systemic issues around housing that we're trying to deal with. With that, I'm going to transition now to some community updates. And then we'll have some questions, so we'll get to everybody's questions if you got them. Weiss Hospital is a safety net hospital that's in our district. It's just the east of here in Uptown. Another safety net hospital in our district is Swedish, which is on Fall Street, California. Thoric, which is also in Uptown, and then their second location in Andersonville. We have had to fight really hard to protect all of our safety net hospitals around the state because everything from private equity firms buying them up to for-profit entities that are acquiring those hospitals or privatizing services in those hospitals so that they become a shell of themselves. And in a situation with Weiss, unfortunately, the state has done everything it's supposed to do and more to help stabilize that hospital. We have a real leadership problem there where the CEO is in a situation now where HVAC systems that were supposed to be installed over a year ago have not been installed. Unfortunately, Weiss Hospital was temporarily shuttered by the federal government on June 17th of last year because the HVAC systems were failing people in the ER, and then their ICU were in rooms where it was 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's not a safe situation. Shame on the CEO, Prasad Manoj, for getting in a situation where that was the case. And we continue to try to get the federal government to release the hold that they've put on this hospital because they don't, in the eyes of the federal government, it is not a safe place for people to get health care. In the eyes of folks in the community, we need to get those HVAC systems installed so that it can continue to be a safe place for people to get health care. And then we need to do everything we can to preserve Weiss along with our other safety net hospitals so they continue to meet the needs of very low-income people in our communities. It's really frustrating to see the scenario where the CEO of the hospital I just think is incompetent. He does not return phone calls. He's actively rude to just about every elected official now who's trying to work with him. There's another hospital that is co-owned by him and his entity called West Suburban Hospital, where they just 3 weeks ago, the same thing was announced there that happened at Weiss Hospital. And we are all trying to work together to try to get them both reopened because they're both critical access to care in our region. And it's just, what I would ask from the community is that if you care about this issue, organizations like One Northside are actively organizing to try to get Weiss Hospital reopened. I think we need new leadership there. We need a new CEO. We need a whole kind of new cast of characters to come in and run the place, because it's been really hard to work with them when it feels like there isn't a CEO and there isn't any real leadership there. No matter how much money we bend over backwards to supply them, and the state has, the federal government has as well, we're going to continue to see the same thing play out, unfortunately. And it's part of a larger dynamic where obscure private equity firms are buying up these properties, particularly when the geography where they're located is attractive, like close to the lake in a gentrified neighborhood. And so elected officials like myself and others have to be extra on guard for protecting hospitals that we do have, the healthcare facilities we do have, and making sure that any problems that they have are known early. And so that is an update there. I'll take any questions folks might have on that. I know we're in Lincoln Square, we're not in Uptown, but we cross east and west all the time. So let me give you another quick update about Department of Human Services. This is the state agency that is usually the first point of access for folks who really are on hard times. So, you know, if you're looking for anything from permanent supportive housing to how to get enrolled in Medicaid, or how to even access long-term disability benefits, this is an agency you're probably gonna come across. And it's my job, by the way, and my staff's job to help you to have a productive interaction with these agencies. So if you've hit a bureaucratic wall with any state agency, this is literally why I exist. So make sure we know about that so we can help to knock heads where we need to be blunt. But what I wanted to say about the DHS department is we have lobbied them for years to create a satellite office right here in our district. So people don't have to go all the way downtown or go through 5 or 6 different menus to get to somebody that can help them to get a basic public benefit that their tax dollars have paid for. And so we've got an update that our DHS satellite office is due for an early 2027 opening. My staff and I are staying on them literally month by month. Not trying to micromanage this, but just making sure the communication threads are open. Sometimes in government, people don't talk to each other. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand does. I hate it, especially when there's vulnerable people who are impacted. So if we've got any questions on that, let us know. But I did want to provide an update on that for yourselves and folks that may be listening in. And then finally, you know, we've got a number of SNAP work requirements that have kicked in. My team and I have tried to make sure that the constituents know about these things before they go into effect. I think the first round went into effect on February 1st, and we put out notifications around that. Medicaid, unfortunately, will have Medicaid work requirements that will kick in at the beginning of next year. I have been aggressively pushing the Department of Health and Family Services under the state to have a proactive plan for the 150,000, 300,000 people who are expected to get kicked off of Medicaid in Illinois. This is really a calamity, and it's honestly the thing that if there are 3 things that keep me up at night, this is definitely one of them. The idea of just people losing Medicaid and having no access to healthcare. And so we're going to keep pushing the state agencies on this. I'd like for the state to be really proactive in how we respond to the Trump administration's manufactured crises that they continue to hand down to us, and not just sit there powerless in the face of tyranny. If I had my druthers, we would not have work requirements on people who are hungry and on people who are sick that need health care. Such is the world we're living in right now, and all I can tell you is I continue to fight every week on this, whether it's oversight of the state agencies that oversee the federal programs like food stamps and Medicaid, to making sure our constituents just know what's about to happen, what's happening, and to try to mitigate the impact as much as possible. We are working on a bill that would actually create a new program where people who are going to lose their SNAP benefits would get 3 additional months of SNAP benefits from the state. So I don't want to have time-limited SNAP for people, because hunger has increased in the last 5 to 6 years, and it's just continuing to increase. So I don't think this is a short-term problem, unfortunately. And you know, anything we can do to give people at least a heads up, and in 3 months to continue receiving food, while we then try to pair them up with whatever other options may exist. Like our office is a mutual aid hub. We collect non-perishable foods, toiletries, toothpaste, dog food, a number of other commodities, basic commodities that people need to survive, and they are free. If you or anybody you know needs any of that stuff, come to 1040 West Belmar. It is always sitting in the front of the office. You don't even have to explain why you're here. Come in and take what you need. Of course, if you want to leave us with stuff, we're happy to take your non-perishables as well. Gabby Tuodos back there is our outreach coordinator. But any of us, myself included, happy to take your kidney beans and toothpaste to donate to your neighbors, and definitely dog food. Sorry for talking a little fast. I've just been in committee talking a lot, so. But there's a lot to get through too, and I want to make sure that this is, good use of your time. I think that about covers the main part of the presentation. You all got these handouts here, so if you want to know where my website is and how to contact us, rather than talking through all that, just look at the third page of the handout and you'll see everything recapped there. So why don't we now turn it over to my favorite part of my townhouse, which is questions and comments, rants, poem verses, whatever you'd like to share. Thank you.
Question, I'm looking forward very much to the opening of the pedway underneath the red line from Lawrence to Ardmore. Don't see any motion.
Yeah. Well, so for those that don't know, there's been a public works project that's being led by, I think it's by the city of Chicago, CTA, that would create pedestrian spaces under the red line at the east part of our district between, I believe, Lawrence and
Ardmore.
Between Lawrence and Ardmore. Great idea. I unfortunately, because that's under the alderman's purview, don't have updates on the project timelines. But what we can do is our staff can reach out to them and try to get some clarity on it. Or if you reach out to, for those streets mentioned, Alderwoman Mana Hopwood, 48th Ward, represents that area, and they probably can give you a good update on project completion.
Passes right by your office over there in Berwyn.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Bryn Mawr, yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's
I'm really
great.
excited about it. I got online, I saw the renditions. The idea was, well, when you open up the red line,
Yeah.
it would soon follow.
Right.
Nobody would soon follow, and here we are like a year later.
Yeah, it's great. When I first saw the renderings for that, I thought this would be really good for the community.
Nice.
People are gonna love the green space. They're gonna love the opportunity to be outside more. But it'd be nice if we saw that soon, because we waited 100 years to redo the tracks, and we might as well see the benefit of outside. The transit is really transit is a big priority area for me. I also fought really hard to pass the transit bill last fall. Some of you may have read about that. It took a lot of broken glass to make that happen, and so I hope you're using public transit. Stay on top of me and keep in touch with me on your experiences with transit, because we do have the ability of state legislators to call in the upper management of CTA Metro Case and say, hey, what up with this, right? Like if people are continuing to have ghost bus situations. I thought I was on the Foster bus today. I thought it was about to have a ghost bus because I haven't had one in a while, and it was not. But I've been really vigilant to see like where's service improving, because we want this to be real for folks. Yeah.
Yes, I was wondering, what justification is the government or whoever it is using to justify people not getting Medicaid or Medicare, or taking them off of it?
Yeah.
What happens for them to be dropped from it or not to be put on?
Well, so what the Trump administration said, and I don't believe any of this, I think it's stupid, it doesn't make any sense, but what they said they were trying to do is rid fraud and mismanagement and abuse. Those are code words. I'm an 80s baby. When I hear people in government say those words, I usually think this is about to be racism, misogyny, queerphobia. There's just something that they are trying to do and not have it, call it what it is. I was born when I was born. I know these buzzwords. We've heard this stuff. What they're doing has nothing to do with waste, fraud, and abuse, because people on Medicaid likely are too frail to work. They have tried to find work, and they have run into so many walls that they have simply stopped looking for work. In fact, they don't even get counted by the Federal Reserve in terms of who's unemployed. There are people like that live in every Senate district across the state. And so this is, in my opinion, as a state senator and as a person who in my own lifetime has had to use Medicaid, my mother had to use Medicaid, I think that this is meant to be cruel. And I think that unfortunately the Trump administration likes to use people who they perceive as vulnerable or who don't have privilege as pawns. That's really the only way I know how to interpret why these policy changes were made and why we now are left to deal with them. But I will say that, maybe it's because I grew up poor. I grew up 7 blocks from here in a scattered site public housing building that was built in the early 1980s as a result of a 1976 Supreme Court decision that integrated the neighborhood. My family was one of the first black families living here. 40 years later, I'm your state senator. And I know that the people that I grew up with and people who relied on Medicaid are not lazy and not looking for work. That is BS. And so, and I will tell Donald Trump that's on space. It enrages me to see the justifications that folks in the federal government make, including a lot of the Republicans that serve in Congress, that too cowardly to say anything or fight back. And we haven't seen Medicaid cuts like this in our lifetime. These are the biggest Medicaid cuts in history, which is why I was so angry. I probably, was why the committee hearing went 4 hours, but when I sat in front of the Department of Health and Family Services last Wednesday in a budget hearing, I asked them, because we have the power of the purse, I said, what are you doing about this? What are you doing to communicate to people who are going to get hit with these work requirements? What are we doing to automate all this so that if people are exempt from the federal government's work requirements, this will be automatic and they don't have to come down and fill out the paperwork and deal with somebody who's ruining it and make them feel like crap. I've experienced all that in my own lived experiences, and all I can say, I'll do what I can as a state senator to fight against it. And I think myself and a handful of other progressives in Springfield are really bringing hell on this right now.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I don't want to take up too much time, but I do have 2 issues I do want to
Sure.
address. One is just for the anonymity for a friend. I am asking on behalf of him that a situation that has occurred at his workplace where a general manager and a supervisor of the location has actually taken over his franchise of fast food. There used to be fully employed Black people there, and ever since the general manager, which happens to be Hispanic Latina, took over, fired every single person that they fired, with a total of 7 people. Now we're at 8 as of today. Has fired every single person that was fired as a Black person, and they have replaced them with Latino Hispanics in return. And also, they are related to the people that were replaced: sister, brother, cousin, in-laws. And right now, my friend is actually being targeted. He's a hard worker. I've seen him at work. Sometimes I think that he's about to fall over because he's working his butt off just to provide rent and put food on the table and just to live a prosperous life and hit his goals to at least move up and move on. However, his hours got cut for absolutely no reason at all. And there was a lot of his workplace intimidation. There is targeted a targeted work environment, and it's a hostile work environment, especially this racial discrimination going on. It does not take a genius to see that what is going on. There is a situation of nepotism, and it is more than just favoritism. There's actually been cases in California where they have investigated this type of situation. I understand that Latino and Hispanics need to look after their own, but you can't just use the guise of looking after your own and punishing and basically conflicting with other people's work where they have established themselves. They are established that they are hard workers because what they did was go after the low-hanging fruit, and now they're at my friend who is to get rid of because he has a great work ethic and he has great working skills and he's working the job, and it doesn't take a genius to flip burgers. But now they're saying that they're picking at him, trying to gaslight him, thinking that he's doing the job wrong and dinging him for like just taking off his head to just scratch his head for a second. They have been very petty and a lot of the tedious things that they're trying to pick at his spirit. Another person that was actually lied on that they were stealing from a till and they were demoted from manager to a regular employee. That was another Black individual as well. So may I just ask on this particular matter, how do we combat this such situation, especially when the state of California has actually investigated this, prosecuted against this, and won lawsuits on this behavior in the workplace?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's a terrible situation. It reminds me that one bill I did pass into law last year would actually, I think it would be applicable in situations like this where basically if you're an employee and you feel like you've been discriminated against, there's usually a statute of limitations on when you can bring forth a grievance on that. And the statute of limitations priorly was something like 3 months, or it might be 6 months. I brought forward a bill that would extend it to 3 years because I have constituents and I myself have experienced a hostile workplace where sometimes you feel intimidated and don't want to say anything. It takes some time to realize what's happened to you. We were able to get it to 2 years, and I was proud of that. That was law. Governor signed that. That's now protection that folks have that are hostile workplaces. We need to do a lot more. I want to look and see what was done in those other states. I would love to talk more with you about, if you're open to sharing about your friend's situation. But let's definitely be, what was your, well, you can tell me your name later, we'll talk more. Yeah.
Thank you. And my second matter issue is that, upon me moving from one living, I moved to another, and it has been a nightmare from day one of moving in. My owner purposely omitted that he actually lives in the building, and that was not conveyed to us during our tour. He was a different person during our tour, and upon the day of the move, we're actually signing the lease, and we had movers hired to move in. He was literally holding the lease up over our heads, me and my realtor agent's head, just making demands. He is taller than us, but these demands were not agreed upon, and he cussed us out, he threatened us, verbally assaulted us, and we saw him be abusive towards his girlfriend. I unfortunately had to make the tough decision and move in because there was no turning back. He caught me in a very bad situation, but I am in the process of working to get moved. However, I do want to do a release of lease, and since he lives in the building, I am very afraid. He already violated my tenant's rights by walking into my apartment unannounced, no notice, and he said he can do whatever he wants because it's his property, and the door was open, so he felt like coming in. He called me a hoarder because I just packed up and I just moved in, and so apparently I'm a hoarder. But unfortunately, with the verbal abuse that has constantly happened on several occasions, he's cussed me and my friends out to their face. I have witness statements as well, even from my realtor agent, and she has absolutely no reason to lie. So I just want to try to combat that situation, because this is a one living situation I cannot tolerate.
Yeah, well, let's talk more about that, because those kind of protections need to be beefed up in workplaces, housing, healthcare facilities is another area where we see similar things play out. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And I do want to share we're about at 6:30, so we're going to do just a couple more questions. If you need to leave, you're welcome to, but we'll do 2 more questions, and then the center will stick around for a few more one-on-ones.
Hi, actually more of an announcement. I work with an organization called Reparations Media, and we produce a podcast called Change Agents, and season 6 was dedicated to Black immigrants in Chicago. So specifically, we're looking at immigrants from the African diaspora and the Haitian community. So we created resource guides that are specifically, let those communities know about organizations that have translators, legal aid, anything that might help their community out. QR codes, a nice little postcard. I'm going to put some back there, but please, if you live in a community where you know that there's a big, African community or Haitian community, please take some of these and put them out in your local businesses. Or if you have like Ethiopian restaurants or other restaurants that, bring in customers like that, it'd be fantastic. The guys, we worked hard on them and they're really useful. And if you want to listen to the podcast, there's changeagentspodcast.com, where you can always use ears, and it helps us get funding if people listen. And they're also really dynamic. We bring in professional journalists who then work with communities to kind of collaborate on producing the podcast. So they're really community-based podcast, community voice, and they're all solutions-based as well. But most importantly, I'd love to get these resource guides out and get them in areas where they can help these communities. So, thanks.
Thank you for the announcement, and my office can take some of those too. Just keep them in our foyer.
I live right on top of your office.
Oh, yes, so you
Hi, I am a maternal health researcher and have been thinking a lot about how we don't have paid family leave in Illinois. Like, we do have that 40 hours, but that's 40 hours. And today, Virginia actually just passed paid family leave in their state. And I just wanted to hear more about, I was poking around on the state Senate website, so I know there's some stuff going on, but I just want to know, like, where does that stand, and like, do you need people to support it? Because it just seems like there's not a lot of like conversation about it in the state, and I'm happy to be a part of that conversation and support that.
Yeah, we definitely should augment the discussion on this. I'm a firm believer that we should have parental family leave. I think we should expand family leave for parents, for non-traditional family members. I grew up in a multi-generational household, and so there were different folks that played a role. So I specifically was the chief co-sponsor of a bill that became law 2 years ago, which I think is the one you referred to, the Paid Leave Act, which gives people up to 40 hours a week, 40 hours a year
Yeah, just 40 hours a year that are
40 hours a
which
week.
is 5 days.
Yeah, 5 days
Of
off
work.
with no justification or any of that under law. There is another bill that is pending right now that would create family leave in Illinois, and I believe, I can't remember the sponsor off the top of my head, but let me check. I think it might be my colleague Senator Villamalum, who I last saw carrying a bill in this. And you know, we need to make it happen, and you know, I would love to talk with you about some of your research, so that we can build an even more robust case for it, because it's a policy choice, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I think that parents, not just biological parents, but adopted, however, should have the opportunity to spend time with their babies, their infants, and then also throughout their childhoods. And I think we as a society have a long way to go to really expand those provisions for folks. But at the least, we should have paid family leave in Illinois. It should be something that really is meaningful. And so I would love to help to fight for it more, especially if we've got good research and things that can help us to get more allies. All right. I'm going to hang out for a bit. I'm not going to run out of here, but thanks so much for coming to my town hall. I appreciate it having you here.
Thank you.